The road to Emmaus is not, it's not now, it's not in Lent. This is not normally when we'd have this scripture. And I want to let you know that I didn't mess up. I know that I skipped Lent with this scripture, and I floated past Good Friday and then proceeded to leap over Easter. I know. And there is a reason for it, I promise. At least I know that you're thinking there better be, so I will get to it eventually. Personally, when I was younger, I always struggled with the road to Emmaus. I didn't understand how his friends couldn't know him. Jesus at this point has died and rose again, but when his friends on the road to Emmaus see him, they don't know him. And I go, how could that be? How could Jesus's best friends not recognize him? I don't understand that. They had spent all this time traveling and learning and being with him. And like, if COVID has taught us anything, is that we've been with the same people for a long time. So we can imagine that the disciples should really, really have known Jesus. They were stuck together. So this story always puzzled me. I couldn't believe it, not recognize him. It had to mean that either they just weren't Jesus's friends, or they couldn't actually believe, they didn't take that leap of faith that he could arise. So I couldn't believe that they didn't love him. It must be that they couldn't take that leap of faith to look around and see who it was who was with them, because they couldn't believe that we could possibly be past Easter. So as head of innovation with the United Church of Canada, I really wrestle in this time of like, where are we in the story of what's happening? So along with being Beth and Gunter's daughter and Steve and Brian's sister, I'm also the head of innovation. In a church, the United Church of Canada is actually the first denomination in North America to decide that innovation was important. And EDGE has actually been around for 10 years. So we've actually seen a lot of amazing things happening. And I have the blessing to have this job to be part of seeing where the Spirit is taking us. So what I've been asked to do is to share some stories of hope. And don't worry, I will have a point of why I skipped Lent. So one of the first stories that I wanted to share with you is this amazing community of faith called Stittsville United Church. And they've created a new ministry called The Spark. And they started where I think many of our communities of faith start. They just wanted to understand what was possible. They wanted to see what Stittsville United Church could be in the neighborhood. And so they started in an unconventional place. And I know with COVID, we might not feel like this is the place to start, but they literally just put an A-frame sign outside of their church that said free coffee. And they thought, if we do this, I'll be able to actually have conversations with the neighborhoods, maybe neighbors I don't normally speak with, and find out what's needed. So you might not be shocked, but the first day, no one showed up. So the A-frame sign that said free coffee, no one showed up. But the second day, a woman poked her head in and said, are you serious about the sign? Is there really free coffee? And she came in and they had a great conversation and deep conversations. And then every single day, 2 or 3, and then more people started coming in who like wanted to talk about what they wanted Stittsville to look like. Now, at the same time, Ottawa, so Stittsville is basically a suburb of Ottawa, just like Markham is a suburb of Toronto. And at that time, every single child was given a laptop or a tablet in the school. So they realized that Sunday school was going to be pretty boring compared to how the kids were being taught at school. So they decided from all these conversations to start with a new ministry and try something different in Sunday school. So after they had heard all these gifts that were in the neighborhood, they realized that their minister's spark or gift was his sermon on Sunday morning. But then they really thought about that and said, well, everyone has a spark. Everyone has a gift. So how do we share that and make space for that to be shared? So they threw out regular Sunday school and they said, well, why don't we be engaging in a new way? And so up popped someone who was a baker, and Sunday school had baking. They made bread, maybe pretzels. And then the next week, an engineer decided to do a Lego day. And then a local artist decided to do paint classes and maybe journaling, again, with Gwyneth, showing that that's a spiritual practice too. And so Sunday school wasn't just Sunday school in the mornings, it became Sunday afternoons and Wednesday evenings, and people were invited to share their gift in many ways. And one of these programs became so big, it was their paint nights, that they actually had to have reservations where 300 people were taking shifts doing paint. Even during COVID, this has grown where paint nights, they get given huge billboards, go to people's homes, and they get to paint by Zoom together. And then those turn into signs that Stittsville United Church puts up around the entire town to inspire hope during this time where many are feeling isolated. So that is a great story of experimenting in different spiritual practices outside of Sunday morning, and how acknowledging that everyone has a gift and then making room and space for everyone to do that. So that's a great one. We have another story in Windermere United Church, which is in Toronto, and they created the Stone Soup Network. So if you all know that story, yeah, you put the stone in the water and then continuing to add things to it because everyone has a gift again. And so what they ended up doing is they realized that they had a benevolent fund of about $8,000. But by reaching into the neighborhood and speaking to local business owners who might in kind give a haircut or food or cut grass or even a daycare location, they were able to have good, deep conversations in the neighborhood, and their benevolent fund went from $8,000 to $80,000. And they're now expanding the Stone Soup Network across Canada, with Ottawa being one of the first places. Another fresh expression of church is in Beaconsfield United Church, which is in Montreal. And what they ended up doing is they started a youth program for LGBTQ2+ youth to have conversations and feel supported. And that grew that the families of the youth wanted a support group. And then that grew that transgender wanted one, and a seniors group. And now they have all of these important conversations happening. Because Beaconsfield was able to do that, they started talking to other people, and they realized there was a huge gap for Nigerian newcomers. And so the Nigerians, there was a whole group of newcomers who didn't have a place to gather and to celebrate and to be in community. So Beaconsfield actually removed all their pews in the back third of their sanctuary and turned it into a Nigerian community center. And yes, of course, there's spiritual practices and leadership, and you can see how some conversations with the LGBTQ2+ Center, which seems like really, really easy to start, ended up being something that seems almost impossible right now. It was kind of the one little experiment led to another, which led to rethinking who they could be in the neighborhood. And my last example here would be Emmaus community out by Victoria on Vancouver Island. They've actually gone back to like 500 years ago. So with monasteries, they decided to create a monastery, basically. It's a community that worships together. And guess how they actually survive? Maybe like Gwyneth, maybe selling pretzels, but selling bread. And actually they started to brew beer as well. But they're in deep community with each other, often living and spiritual practices every single day. And then they have allies with them as well. So complete, like 4 different, very unique expressions of what new church could really look like. So how does this tie to Emmaus Road? Well, I talk to lots of communities of faith that don't see any of these things that I just named as church. In fact, I spoke to one church in Toronto who said to me, we only have 60 people who worship every single week together. We're dying. And I asked some more questions about some of their outreach, and it turned out that the same church actually had a 300-person meditation circle. But they didn't see that as church. They couldn't see that as church. But to me, a 300-person meditation circle is pretty vibrant. So bring us back to the road to Emmaus. Why couldn't they recognize him? Is it that they weren't taking the leap of faith to see who he really was? Is it like that last example of the church who couldn't see the vibrant ministry that was right before their eyes? They couldn't see that it fit because it didn't fit into their existing model of church. So we are in Lent, but I've asked for a scripture reading that is after Easter, after Jesus has risen again. And I leave you with this thought. Have we been telling ourselves that we as communities of faith are in the story of Lent or Good Friday or Easter Saturday or even Easter? But what if we are already past Easter? What if we were already on the road to Emmaus, but we are not able to see that the Spirit is not only walking with us, but walking before us?
Thank you, Carla. Perhaps we are on that road as we're starting off with a new